Why worship God? Why worship God with all your heart? After all, Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. But why do that? Why worship God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength? I'd suggest this. You're going to worship something or someone. It's inevitable. You're going to focus your life and attention on one thing or another, or one thing, then another. That's worship, the devotion of your attention and focus and your action towards some goal. So why worship God? Because you're going to worship something, and better to worship the true source of yourself and everything than to worship an idol. And the scriptures speak of idols as when we worship something, when we give our allegiance and devotion to something or someone that is not God. When we improperly devote ourselves to something that is not our ultimate source, and in which our heart cannot ultimately rest and be at peace as we and all things flourish in that source. So why worship God? Well, to not be an idolater on one end. But also there's more. I'd say this. And in worshiping God, you can be formed in your life, in your mind, in your soul. You can be formed by wisdom incarnate, by Jesus Christ, as you discover your true self called into being by God, and flourish in giving glory to your Father in heaven, the true source of yourself and of all things. In the scriptures, in Genesis 12, God calls Abram. And the only thing we really know about Abram before this is his family, like his dad's name, sort of where he comes from, and that he married a woman named Sarai. And with no other knowledge about Abram, we get this. Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. God calls Abram, and then it says, so Abram went as the Lord had told him. Why worship God? Because God has called you. You exist, I exist, all things exist because God calls us into existence. In Genesis and in John, it speaks of the Lord creating through a word, through the Logos. And you and I also exist because of God's call, because of God's speaking us into a being in this way that we have this dynamic life that is fulfilled in response to the call of the one who calls us into being, such that our life is lived as this response to God who gives us being. So that is why worship. And we do this every week in church. Like, one of the first things we do after we gather together is, and have the announcements, is our call to worship. And that is showing and expressing this deep dynamic of response in which our hearts and our lives are fulfilled. And so here's like a sample call to worship from our liturgy at First Methodist Lockhart. We say, ascribe to the liturgist says, ascribe to the Lord, O heavenly beings. And then everyone says, ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Then the liturgist later says, the voice of the Lord is powerful. That God's voice. And then everyone answers, the voice of God is full of majesty. Let us praise the name of the Lord. And so the call to worship at the start of our liturgy begins to voice the way in which we who are called into being by God, live our lives in response to God, in dynamic response, praiseful, heartfelt, devoted response to no idol, no created thing, but our loving Father in heaven, the true source of all things. So that's why worship. It's delightful. I invite you to join with us and worship, to interrupt your weekend, to not even put weekend relaxation or this or that political party or this or that ideology or this or that anything else. Let none of those things rule your life, but the voice of God who calls you into being and delights in your delighting in God. Peace to you.